Virginia is still playing baseball in Omaha, college football looks ready to expand its playoffs, and the NCAA takes it on the chin from the Supreme Court. All that and much more this week on Teel and Barber. Welcome in to episode 52 of Teel and Barber, the Richmond Times-Dispatch and Richmond.com's Virginia Tech, UVA, and ACC sports podcast. I'm Mike Barber, ACC beat writer for the paper, and joining me here as always, my co-host, the 13-time Sports Writer of the Year and the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel. David, how are you, sir?
Good morning, Mike. I'm well. Hope everyone up in Charlottesville is the same.
We are all doing well, thank you. And of course, since the last time we've had a show, we celebrated Father's Day. Happy belated Father's Day to you.
And to you.
Thank you, sir.
Dean.
Yes, all of us here in that camp. So I'm curious, what did you do in the Teel household to mark the momentous occasion?
Well, we'll get to it in a while. I watched UVA baseball.
Of course.
Watched UVA baseball and John Rahm's redemption tour at Torrey Pines.
Wasn't that a cool story? I mean, given the way things unfolded for him the last time out, that was it's funny because people always talk with golf of, hey, if you don't have Tiger or I think to an extent Phil, but there's so many great stories and great personalities in that game.
There are, and I mean, I don't know about you or our listeners. I'm getting tired of the whole DeChambeau, Koepka Twitter feud, which I believe is a little bit choreographed, if not a lot choreographed. But for John Rahm to lose or have the memorial just pulled out from under him on national television, no less, and shame on the PGA Tour for pulling that stunt. You do that in private. You in the scorer's tent, you don't do that to somebody on national TV when they have a 6-shot lead. But then next time out, you win your first major. I mean, wow, what a great story.
Yeah, it worked out okay for him. And I'm glad you said that about Koepka and DeChambeau, because I keep telling people it reminds me as a kid, I used to watch the WWF wrestling. And it just, I mean, I'm sure there's an audience and a segment that plays to and maybe helps some ratings. But unless you're going to step up and pair them together, don't go halfway with that. It did feel a little manufactured and maybe scripted.
No question.
Now, we also, here in this house, we celebrated the second birthday for my son. He turned 2 last Friday, and we're taking him on vacation. And David, I wanted to ask you, we're going to fly him on a plane with us to Massachusetts. And I'm a bit, I guess terrified isn't too strong a word. And my son has been phenomenal to this point. Before the pandemic, we took him to every restaurant we could get him to in Charlottesville. He was great. Since things have cleared up and we've been able to get vaccinated, we've taken him outdoors to restaurants. He's been great. But there's something different about being trapped in an airplane and subjecting all these other innocent people to his potential behavior. Did you fly Tiny Teel at any point?
Oh yeah, she's flown a bunch, and will again a week from today when we head west. Now Tiny Teel is almost 10 now, but yeah, as a toddler, we had her on an airplane, and she did great. Now, you've been on airplane, you've been on flights before where it can get pretty grim with a child nearby. A lot depends if they have any ear issues.
Yeah,
it's especially for landing, and then just make sure the tablet is charged, dude.
David, we went one step further. My wife bought a new Kindle for him just for the trip. So he's mesmerized by the newness of it. And we've got, he loves the Cars movies. That was the theme of his birthday party, the Pixar Cars, Lightning McQueen. So we've got those downloaded on it, a bunch of games that she's adding. And you're right, though. I remember as a kid struggling with my first flight because of the ear pressure. And so, and he's too young to chew gum, which is always the trick,
Yeah,
for older kids. I'm hoping maybe that giving him one of these baby pouches with the yogurt, that just the swallowing will help. Who knows? But I'm glad to hear that at least you and your family survived flying with a toddler, and
we
um,
did.
I'll hope for the same. And yeah, so it's going to be interesting. And I just flew to Hartford to get myself back acclimated to that process. And our daughter has been on a couple flights with us now for vacations, but this will be the first for the baby son. So we'll see how he does, and fingers crossed.
Absolutely. We'll be thinking about you.
Now, we've been thinking a lot about Virginia baseball, and they're still there in Omaha. They came 6 outs away from really being in the driver's seat to get back to the College World Series final. They had that 6-0 win over Tennessee. Abbott with the great start for them in that game, in the opener out there, and they led their second game 4-0. Griff McGarry, he had a no-hitter going into the 8th inning, and then David, it just all fell apart for the Cavaliers. What did we see there?
Mike, we could do a whole podcast on the 8th inning last night. I mean, you mentioned Virginia going to the 8th inning against Mississippi State with not only a 4-0 lead, and not only with Griff McGarry throwing a no-hitter, he's throwing a no-hitter into the 7th inning for the second consecutive start.
It's unreal.
In the NCAA tournament. I mean, the guy has been lights out. And oh, by the way, he's been lights out in three starts in the tournament, and he's yet to get a decision. I mean, Griff McGarry is still winless on the season. He's 0-5. I mean, it doesn't compute.
There's no justice. No justice in baseball.
No. I mean, with this guy's stuff and this guy's talent. But yeah, I mean, UVA's lead should have been much bigger. Left runners in scoring position on multiple occasions. I believe they ended the night with 10 runners left on base. So that 4-0 lead should have been 6-7-0, which would have given them obviously a far bigger cushion. But McGarry gives up the 2-run jack to Kellum Clark, which broke up the no-no and the shutout. And then for the first time this postseason, the bullpen failed them.
Yeah, the bullpen story is interesting to me, David, because they go with Stephen Schoch, who obviously was such a big story earlier in this postseason and had been lights out for them. But the storylines we had heard coming out of Omaha was that after the long outing in the Super Regional, that his arm hadn't bounced back. And it's easy, of course, to second guess now, but shouldn't the coaching staff know? I mean, it didn't take long, right, with Steven out there to say, okay, he doesn't have his stuff. Shouldn't the coaching staff or the bullpen catcher, shouldn't they have known that before he went out there?
Well, it's interesting, Mike, because first they went to Zach Messenger, and he couldn't get anybody. Gave up an infield hit. Now, maybe that was a generous scoring decision. Maybe that's a play that Nick Kent should have made, and I don't know. It was an interesting scoring decision there, and then he gives up a double, and then they bring Schoch in, and Mike, he didn't pitch in the Super Regional. He had not pitched since the regional against Old Dominion. He had not pitched in 2 weeks on the day since that 75 pitch outing you referenced against Old Dominion. And not only he hadn't pitched in 2 days, they bring him in to face a left-hander who, oh, by the way, is the SEC Player of the Year.
Yeah, not just any left-hander.
Right, Tanner Allen, excuse me. And second pitch, it's in the bullpen, and UVA's behind. And you're like, holy smokes, that escalated quickly. But you're right. Clearly, Schoch was not at his best and didn't have his usual stuff. And I was frankly surprised that they brought him in. I thought they'd go with a lefty, and I certainly didn't think they'd bring in a cat who hadn't thrown in 2 weeks to face Tanner Allen.
Yeah. Now, of course, again, it's always easy to second guess because we know where that Allen ball lands. But at the time, I thought the
Yeah.
same thing as it was unfolding, and then to see the stuff, it just looked like physically he wasn't ready to throw. And you mentioned that Kent play though, and I think about, not that it was a routine or easy play by any stretch, but when you think about championship plays, that's kind of the one where you get that play. And maybe that's your championship play, so to speak. And
Hmm.
Virginia's been making a lot of those this postseason,
Oh
and it
yeah.
just didn't happen. And let's not say it didn't happen in the Mississippi State game. It didn't happen in that eighth inning, which was
Right.
just, God, it's going to go down as one of the worst in program history in what's been an otherwise such a memorable postseason for them.
Yeah, and who knows how it plays out now. We're recording this Wednesday morning, so tomorrow night Virginia faces an elimination game. Obviously, the Cavaliers are well versed in that scenario. They've already had 6 of them and gone 6-0, and now they get Texas tomorrow night. And if they survive that one, they'll have 2 more eliminations games, because they would then have to turn around and beat Mississippi State not once but twice to reach the championship series, perhaps against the other surprise team in Omaha, North Carolina State.
Right, isn't that wild? And both ACC teams there, and playing entertaining baseball. But David, I think that's what was so take your breath away about the Mississippi State loss was, if they finish it, if UVA
Mm-hmm.
finishes that game, what a great position they're in. Perfectly
Yes.
set up. Nate Savino presumably would have been fully rested to start against the next game, which I guess wouldn't have been Texas, but everything would have been aligned perfectly. Now Savino comes in relief. Don't know what the plan will be in terms of who starts against Texas. It's a little bit of a scramble. Now, you referenced this team has done quite well with their backs to the wall, but David, in this format, in the College World Series, the difference between 2-0 and 1-1, it's a lot more than that, than one game, isn't it?
It's immense, and ESPN has run several graphics. 25 of the last 30 national champions have started the College World Series 2-0.
That tells you
So
what.
yeah, it's a slog to come out of that losers bracket. It truly is.
Now, it's always interesting in college sports in general, because basketball, you have the Final Four, and I'm not, obviously everybody wants to win a championship, but how do you look at reaching the College World Series? I think of reaching the Final Four as, this has been a great season, and not everyone's going to win the championship that year. And the Final Four feels like the destination, and the College World Series to me feels like the destination.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that maybe other, semifinals, certainly in pro sports, it never feels that way, right? Ask the Buffalo Bills. Like, I don't know, for some reason, there's something about the college, and maybe it's the pageantry of the event itself. But for this Virginia team to be in the College World Series, how would you evaluate this year, regardless of where it goes from now?
Oh my gosh, especially when you consider from whence they came,
Mm-hmm.
right? Damon Dillman, our good friend from Charlottesville, on the television side, had a great tweet, and I don't have the exact numbers or the exact date in front of me, but he referenced like this particular date in April where NC State's like 1-8 in the ACC,
Yep.
and Virginia, which eventually became 4-12. I don't know what the Cavaliers were on this particular date, but they're way below 500. And to think that both of these squads are among the final 8 standing, and now among the final 6 standing, is remarkable. And Virginia could go out and lose to Texas tomorrow night, and I don't think anyone in their right mind would think that this was anything less than just an exceptional, memorable season.
Yeah, it certainly is. And you mentioned the turnaround, and I keep coming back to, this was a team with high expectations going into the year, right? So it's not the true Cinderella story. This was a team we thought would be a top 5 team, but the way things started, the way things were going, there was a point where I think it's fair to say people had, written this team off. It just didn't look like a very good baseball team, and again, I think it started with Andrew Abbott really getting on track as a dominant Friday night starter. I think this has just been a very memorable season. And you think about Brian O'Connor, and this team had been in the NCAA tournament every year that Brian O'Connor was coach, and then they hit that drought with 2017 on, and the way it weighed on Brian, the way it weighed on this program, it's almost like a weight was lifted once they made the field. And then it was like, okay, relax and play. And they've been fun to watch. And, we're impartial, but I think we both wouldn't mind if the run goes on a little bit longer.
No, you root for a great story, and Virginia's been a great story, and not to suggest that the other teams out there wouldn't be, and heck, you wrote about Evan Justice this week. Yep. And the NC State closer from Richmond, and what a fabulous story he's become. Against Arkansas, he's lights out in the Super Regional to get the Wolfpack to Omaha, and look at what the Wolfpack has done recently. Kevin Kopps of Arkansas is hands down the best pitcher in the country. He's got an ERA of less than 1. He was 12-0 on the season. And the Wolfpack beat him in Game 3 of the Supers on the road against the top-seeded team in the tournament.
Yeah, and as we referenced, they're 2-0 in Omaha, which is the position that makes such a huge difference. And that's a club, David, that was 1-8 to open ACC play. Mm-hmm. 1-8 to open ACC play, and a lot of credit to their coach too, Elliot Avent. Who, when I talked to Evan Justice, and I also spoke with Clint Chrysler, their pitching coach, and they said, to be in a bad spot like that, Elliot Avent may be the best coach you can have, because he's just so jovial and fun-loving and supportive, and he's competitive as all get out. But he didn't have to change his tone or his demeanor to get that team to just say, hey, there's more baseball to play. And the rest of their season, I think 32-8 after their slow start, it's just been phenomenal. And you mentioned Justice, who was bluntly not very good as their Friday night starter. Mm-hmm. He got hit around, and they had high hopes for him in that role, and it just didn't work out. And then the move to the bullpen, and it wasn't like he was put out to pasture. He became the key guy at the back end of that bullpen, and he's really shown this postseason and already in 2 wins in Omaha.
And how about how he finished off the other night against Vanderbilt? They beat Jack Leiter, in a 1-0 game. Vanderbilt's undefeated in the tournament. Jack Leiter had struck out 15 dudes, but all it took was one swing. NC State gets a home run, and they first team all season to shut out Vanderbilt. I believe actually it was the Commodores' first shutout loss since 2019. And just crazy. I mean, baseball, as you well know, heck, you're from up north and you've been around the major leagues and the Yankees and such. It's the most random, peculiar of our team sports. You just never know.
I always think of that closer role. It's like few things in sports, right? It's like a goalie facing maybe a penalty shot in hockey, or a breakaway. It's such a unique role. Maybe a place kicker lining up for a game-winning field goal, but a closer. Think how many pitches, right? You're at least facing 3 batters, maybe more, with a 1-run lead, with everything on the line. And we saw what happened with Stephen Schoch if you don't have your stuff. So what Evan Justice has been able to do and over longer outings here in the postseason, it really is remarkable performance under pressure. So from the diamond, let's go to the gridiron. And they're not playing this time of year, but that doesn't mean college football isn't a huge topic. And
oh my gosh!
And boy, are they in some ways taking over this time of year. Let's start with the move to potentially expand the college football playoff. That seems to be gaining all the steam here, is towards this 12-team format proposal. David, first, your just impression of the fact that this is kind of where we've landed as maybe the next step. I think a lot of people, I know me, I thought 8 was the logical next step. Are you surprised 12 seems to be what's gaining steam right now?
Now that I've had a chance to look at and consider the proposal, no. Because when you think about it, Mike, if with a 14 playoff and no automatic qualifiers. You essentially had 4 at-large teams being chosen to compete for the national championship. Had they gone strictly to 8, there were going to be automatic qualifiers, probably 6, because the group of 5 would have demanded 1. So you've got then 6 AQs and only 2 at-larges. Well, that's not really expanding access, especially for the Power 5 guys. So that didn't really make sense. Now, with 12, you're going to have the 6 highest rated conference champions. No conference is guaranteed, but the 6 highest rated conference champions, they're in. And you have 6 at-larges. And in that way, it almost mirrors the NCAA basketball tournament, where you have 32 AQs and 36 at-larges. So the ratio of automatics to at-larges is pretty darn similar to the basketball tournament. So I really like that 12-team notion.
So you do, and this is where I disagree, and I'll tell you why, because that all makes perfect sense. I guess in my mind or viewpoint, I wasn't trying to make the football playoffs like the NCAA basketball tournament. I love the NCAA basketball tournament. It's maybe the best sporting event that there is, certainly, that we get involved in covering. And we love the upsets, right? We love the drama and the unexpected and all that. But I don't know that the NCAA basketball tournament gives us the champion that was the best team all year. And that's okay. I think that's fine. I think it works great for basketball. For whatever reason, in football, I prefer the idea that the team that was the best all year is crowned the champion. And I think when you go to 12, you start to really endanger that outcome. Not the end of the world. It's going to be wildly entertaining. TV ratings, all that's going to be off the charts. I think it's great for fans. But for me, there's just something about, for some reason, I want my football season to end with the best team all year winning the championship. And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter to me in basketball. Maybe because I love that tournament so much. This, to me, I just worry that, hey, I'm not saying that the number 1 team is going to lose to the number 12 team. I'm saying, now your 2 seed, maybe the team they're playing in the second round, there's an upset there. Your path becomes easier. I don't know. To me, 8 was the way to go, because you get all your league champions in, and the concern of, hey, sometimes there's 2 teams in the SEC or there's 2 teams in the ACC that deserve it. Well, with the 2 at-larges, that opportunity is there too. I don't know. 8 seemed to me to be a really comfortable fit that would have expanded. It would have increased access because you would have had the chance for multiple teams from the Power 5 plus the group of 6. I don't know. It just, to me, it feels like, as much as I enjoy and love the upset, I sort of dread it conceptually.
Well, let me remind you of one thing. I'm almost certain I have the number right here. You know how many times the number 1 seed has won the college football playoff in 7 years?
I don't. I know it's not. Go ahead.
Twice.
But I'm not convinced that the number 1 seed was necessarily the best team all year.
Okay.
I think when you've got those 4, there's been a smaller gap.
Good point.
So I think that 4-team playoff, and I think an 8-team playoff would do the same. I think it would tell us, okay, these are clearly the elite. Now let's let them play it out, and I can recognize that team as being the best. But if you get a 2-loss team in, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't deserve a championship, but a 2-loss team, did they have the best year? Were they the best all year? No, they weren't. They put it together in the postseason after a very strong year, which, again, that's what we get in basketball, and we all love it, right? I mean, we all fall over ourselves for it. It's great. It's phenomenal. For whatever reason, when I think about football, I like the fact that, hey, these 4 teams were, and I know when I use the word clearly better, there's some debate always when you get to 3 and 4 versus 5 and 6. And I guess I look at it this way. I've never felt like the team that might have been the best in the country was number 9. I've never felt that. I've never felt the team that might be the best in the country was number 8. So to me, you go to 8, you've expanded, you make sure you get everybody in, but you're not giving teams sort of do-overs for the regular season. And David, you and I have talked and written about the regular season in college football is what it is because you can't stub your toe. And now it just feels like, hey, you can stub your toe maybe a couple times and, still put it together at the end and win a title. Nothing wrong with that. I don't love it.
I think November is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Because so many teams are going to think, rightfully or wrongfully, that they're in the mix. And I think their fan bases are going to think that. And I think the games are going to be really, really good. And I also believe that this will encourage more people to play more challenging non-conference games.
Yeah, I think from an entertainment standpoint, it's a home run. And you're right, because now you can play that big non-conference game, lose it, and you're not out. Right? You're not trying to sneak into the playoff with smoke and mirrors. You can take a loss, maybe two, and still be there. Again, I love the entertainment value of it. I think what it potentially creates is, going back to baseball, there are a few things I enjoy more than a good pennant chase at the end. And I know they've watered that down some with the wild card and whatnot. But I mean, as a kid, I remember it's like, hey, either you win the pennant or you're done. And I think that will bring some of that drama of, hey, we got 2-3 weeks to go. Who's gonna excel in that crucible and who's gonna fold? So again, I'm going to enjoy it if they end up going this route. I think TV ratings are going to be through the roof. I don't know. I have my issues with if we see teams 9, 10, 11, 12 in the semis or in the finals, have we produced a true champion?
So it'll be interesting to see. And like you, I believe 12 is going to get proved. But charting this over the years to see, just how competitive those last 3 to 4 seeds are,
right,
and how much noise they make. It'll be fascinating to watch. To me, the one big flaw in this, Mike, is not having the quarterfinals on campus.
Yeah.
I just think that's a real swing and a miss on the working group's part, and it may get corrected when they, during this process this summer of essentially a listening tour that the commissioners are going to go on talking to their constituents. Because I just don't think that you give away your quarterfinals to the bowls. I've never understood that relationship and why college football is so beholden to the bowls. And I'd much rather see a college football playoff quarterfinal in Tuscaloosa or Death Valley or the Big House or the Horseshoe or maybe even Lane Stadium or Scott Stadium than I would some antiseptic pro stadium.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting too when you think about, there's a tradition with the bowls, certainly. If you're in the 12-team playoff, are you out of the bowls? If you lose in the opening round, can you play in a bowl? I'll be curious to see how they approach all of that, and what they think about the number of games, because we've talked a lot about athlete safety, player safety, and health, and maybe even a bigger story on the college athletics front coming down from the Supreme Court. 9-0 decision against the NCAA this week. The specifics of the case dealt with NCAA limitations on what educational benefits, like laptop computers, schools could provide their athletes. But David, the big news in the headline was the opinions penned by 2 of the justices in the 9-0 decision. They read as a scathing indictment of the NCAA's entire model and seemed to scream to the NCAA, hey, you'll lose every case you bring here, so don't come back with this argument. David, I thought that was kind of earth-shaking.
It really was, Mike, and I think you're correct in that if you read Justice Gorsuch's decision, he wrote for the 9-0 majority, and then if you also read Justice Kavanaugh's scathing concurring opinion, they are both invitations to further litigation if the NCAA does not get its house in order very, very quickly. In fact, the lead attorney in the case, Steve Berman released a statement that essentially said he's got other people teed up and ready to go and ready to file suit if things don't change.
And it's fascinating because, and neither of us are attorneys, but why did the NCAA think this was a good route to go to appeal to this? It's not like they went up there and lost a close case. It's not like they had a technicality. They thought, I mean, they got creamed, right? 9-0. I joked on Twitter that people thought it might be 6-3, and then the NCAA didn't cover the spread in this one. Why did they think this would work?
I'm not even sure, Mike, they thought it would work. They're just procrastinating. They are, and when we say they, let's be clear here. As much as we all want to pounce on Mark Emmert and the president of the NCAA, and 99% of the time he deserves it. But let's also make clear that he serves the membership. These are athletic directors and presidents from all over the country who have stubbornly just clung to this antiquated view of amateurism and intercollegiate athletics. And it doesn't matter how much of a traditionalist you are, and I am to a certain extent, but you just have to evolve with the times. The athletes today, their attorneys, public opinion, Congress, the courts, no one is going to stand for this any longer. And you either change or you perish. And that's the choice that the association has right now.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the hang on loosely but don't let go. Yeah. The NCAA has been clinging too tight, and gradual change could have avoided them being. Now they feel like they're at a precipice, right? Yep. They feel like they're at the edge of the cliff here. It feels like gradual change could have avoided this. I had an interesting discussion with UVA athletic director Carla Williams this week, and Carla's out in Omaha for the College World Series, but we were talking about some of these bigger issues, and she's a big proponent of the NCAA model. Now, when I say that, she loves that it affords scholarship opportunity to people who might not be going to college otherwise, especially on the women's side. Carla Williams has told me flat out, she said, hey, she played college basketball at Georgia. Now she's an athletic director in the ACC. She wouldn't be those places without her athletic scholarship. Her hotel in Omaha was right outside, right across the street from the Olympic training where the Olympic swim trials were. And she talked about the excitement of producing Olympic athletes. But David, those are parts of the NCAA model that nobody's trying to get rid of, right? Like those parts can maintain while you also modernize and update the financial aspect as it relates to getting these athletes some of what they, I think, deserve.
Exactly. And to his credit, in his concurring opinion, Mike, Brett Kavanaugh, he outlined some of the issues that essentially giving the athletes a cut will create, because you will have Title IX concerns. You will have concerns about funding Olympic sports, because why do programs such as UVA's national championship women's swimming team exist? Because of the revenue that Bronco Mendenhall's football program and Tony Bennett's basketball program generate. So if you start sharing some of that wealth with the athletes in some way, does that affect your ability to then support all your Olympic sports? It's a question. So beyond name, image, and likeness, which is coming, it's coming next week, by the way, what does the model look like? As athletic director at Northwestern, Jim Phillips, now the ACC commissioner, in 2014 and 15, he fought long and hard when Northwestern's athletes tried to unionize. But again, as Justice Kavanaugh noted, maybe collective bargaining is a common sense approach to this. Who would represent the athlete? I don't know. But at some point in the very near future, they got to figure this out.
Yeah, and in my backyard, we have a seesaw. And if I sit on one side and my son sits on the other side, he's up in the air and I'm down on the ground. And I say that because I think that when you look at this issue, for many years, it was so complicated, and it is so complicated, to adjust this system to pay the players, to get them some of that revenue, to share that. But I think what this Supreme Court decision did was showed you, hey, it's going to be plenty complicated if you try to stick it out with this model too. So I think the seesaw is sort of leveled off now where, hey, it's hard work on the right and it's hard work on the left. And we, I think, all know which way it's going to tip now going forward. And I think we both feel that's correct. And finding a way to share that revenue, finding a way to do it. And, I hope there is some leeway and latitude for the NCAA, because there are a million pitfalls with, it's easy for a guy like me to say, hey, start paying the players. They're the ones producing the revenue. Pay the coaches less, pay the players more like the pro model, right? in the pros, it's the players getting the money much more so than most of the coaches. But I think there's so much complicated tentacles to this issue that I do hope, since we're moving the right direction, that fans and media give the NCAA a little leeway to get there. Because, Carlos Williams said this to me too. There are going to be some bumps and bruises, whether it's adjusting to name, image, likeness, whether it's expanding the playoff, whether it's the legalization, which I'm writing about today, the legalization of sports gambling. These are very tenuous, changing, tumultuous times for college sports. I think it's all going to come through just fine, but it isn't going to be a 2-week process. And I hope people have some patience and some stomach for that.
And oh, by the way, it comes on the heels of a pandemic that ravaged all their bottom lines.
Yeah. So Carla Williams, who I keep referencing, this is her first job as an athletic director. She's been in administration, she's been in coaching, she's been an athlete. And I told her, man, what a fascinating time to be essentially a rookie athletic director, to have all of this change in the landscape, and then a pandemic, a global pandemic, the likes of which college sports has really never had to contend with. I told her she should be able to write a best-selling book whenever the dust settles.
Yeah, I'm sure she would say, interesting. If she got a mulligan, I'm sure she'd rather have it without the pandemic.
At least ease your way into your tenure, right?
Yes.
Yes, no doubt. Well, David, when we're done here, I have an interview with a former UVA athlete, football player, Chris Long. We're going to talk about all of these topics, all of these issues. He's a fascinating guy. And among the myriad things that he's been involved in is he has his own podcast, which if you hadn't listened to, it's very entertaining because Chris is very entertaining. Now, we've both had the chance to spend time with him before and kind of could see him in that role, I think. But it got me thinking, and it brought me to this week's edition of Who You Got.
Thanks, Mike. If you could pick any athlete you've covered from any point in your career to give their own podcast, who would it be? Let's start with David.
Malcolm Brogdon at UVA is such a thoughtful and compelling figure. And Dwight Vick, the former Virginia Tech offensive lineman, he always fit that bill for me. J.J. Redick at Duke, who I was around even when he was in high school. And he has his own podcast now, which is a great listen, by the way. But for sheer entertainment value, because you never know what he might say, and it's sure to go off the rails sometimes, because we just talking about practice. Give me Allen Iverson on a regular podcast. It would be awesome.
That is a phenomenal answer. And you have a better wealth of candidates with the time that you've spent doing this job. It's funny. When I thought of the question, I thought, hey, Malcolm Brogdon, Charles Snowden, like, wow, wouldn't that be some high level chatter? And then I thought about Anton Exum and Jack Tyler and the way they used to hold court with the media at Virginia Tech football. And I thought that would be fascinating. And I think about a guy like Eric Green, who played basketball at Virginia Tech and was just so interesting. But in the end, I went the way you did, and I went for entertainment value. I went for laughs. And the guy that I always found something to at least chuckle at when we talked to him was former Virginia Tech defensive end James Gale.
It always comes back to the 757, Mike. I'm just telling you.
You guys have the personality, man. You guys have the character there. And James Gale, to me, no matter what the topic, if he always found a way to say something, either that it was so entertaining and wild or that it was so out of left field and off the charts. I don't know if he could bring it every week, but if he could, man, I think that would be an entertaining listen.
Something about Bethel High School. He and Iverson both.
It's either in the water or it's something they're teaching there. Maybe that's a podcast we need to delve into, is why do they produce such big personalities? And no doubt, those would be a couple of shows worth listening to. I hope today's show was worth listening to. We thank you for being a part. You can subscribe to Teel and Barber on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your favorite pods. And please consider supporting local journalism with an online subscription to the Times-Dispatch. You can find special promotional offers available at richmond.com. Today's show was produced by Dean Hoffmeyer. Teel and Barber is a podcast of the Richmond Times-Dispatch and richmond.com. For David Teel, I'm Mike Barber. Thanks for listening. Be healthy and safe, and please join David and me again next time.